Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching from YouTube and want to learn more about what we do, go to our website at officehours.global. Our first hour will be answering all of your questions about media and virtual events, as well as the technology that supports them. Our second hour during the week is usually whenever we specialize something. We have a nice schedule on our website on officehours.global. Check that out to see what events are scheduled for the next week. Today, we're just going to be doing 2 hours of questions and answers. So you get to be the producers and tell us what we're going to be covering today. Alex is back with us. He is a panelist. So Alex, good to see you back.
It's good to be back. Good to be back. And thanks, Josh, for running it. I felt good enough. I thought it'd be fun to get back on the panel. I wasn't sure I can hold the whole panel for 2 hours. And so Josh was kind enough to make sure that the hosting continues to go forward, and I'll jump in as much as I can.
Yeah, glad to have you back. I'll let the camera look at me for a little bit. So, Mitchell, let's get into our questions. What do the producers want us to answer for them?
Thank you, Josh. First one is coming in, and it's voted up, so it's a good question and a good answer, I hope. Andy Carluccio from San Francisco asked, anything interesting in the next Zoom client release? Perhaps 1080p live streaming from the client will help some folks?
Yeah, you'll notice, too, if you've been a long-time Office Hours watcher, that our original shows, our recent shows, look much better than our original shows for a lot of reasons. But for one reason, it was a regular Zoom meeting, and the streaming was only in 720p. So one of the reasons why we look so good is the 1080p broadcast. But that is a fantastic addition to Zoom. Alex, what do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I think that it's exciting that we're going to be able to, people are going to finally be able to get 1080p. Hopefully the logo's a little smaller too, maybe proportionate at least. But I think that having the 1080p is going to make a big difference for a lot of people that are doing RTMP out or 1080p out. It's the 720 was great when we first started using it, but it's really great and I think it really puts what Zoom's doing a little bit above everybody else, because most of the other clients are still all working in 720 at all. Like that's all they do. So I think it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, very good. And Mitchell?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the dumb question, but does that mean everything, even if you have a pro account or a business account, that you're going to be putting out 1080 or just a regular free client?
I don't know that for sure. I'm going to guess that you would have to have the 1080p setting in your account before you get a 1080p stream.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Ken Jones?
I understood that one of the reasons why we didn't have 1080 beforehand was a limitation on bandwidth. Was that internet-wide, or what was the difficulty with that?
It's actually more complex than that. My understanding of it anyway is that it's more complex than that, is that it really is the service to everybody who's in it. So how many people... Everybody in your meeting is going to get a 1080p stream, or in the past it's been that way. And so, if you set it to 1080p, it just means a lot of people are losing frames and having things that aren't, a lot of the viewers and the folks that are jumping in that may not have the bandwidth to support it. So it's not necessarily just that it's trying to save resources. Although I will say that, it is a lot of resources, to do 1080 all the time. And if everybody had it all the time, it would probably actually impact the internet. So we just have to kind of keep that in mind as well.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Do you think that they're responding to the continued build out of the internet and the availability of broadband to everybody?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that my guess is that they're also building up the infrastructure to do it. I mean, I think that it just takes time, what Zoom did at the beginning of the pandemic is kind of profound, to be able to go to basically grow 100x, and be able to suddenly just handle an enormous amount of, and I think that there's just been a lot of, my guess is that there's a lot of backfill going on, of filling in all those bits and pieces. And so I think it's just going to keep getting better now.
Yeah, I wish I had time to check out that great news from Zoom, but interested to know some of the details about it. So I'm sure we'll find out about it, especially some of our community that likes to dig in to all of the new Zoom releases. All right, Mitchell, what's our next question?
Next one coming in from me. I have invited some folks onto After Hours to join us on office hours, but have a problem suggesting what is the best way to join. Any suggestions?
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, there should be a link in the email that goes out every day. That should be the link that lets them register for After Hours. So I should say, I think near the top, when office hours is closed, After Hours is opened, and that's a link to register for After Hours.
Is that an automatic verification? I'm sorry. Appreciate it, Josh. Is that an automatic verification of that email when you fill it out?
That's a registration link. Like the After Hours one is not the link to go into After Hours. It's a registration. It's to the registration page. It should be anyway. So that should be all. Someone might need to test it. Just put it into an incognito page, and you'll know whether it is or not. But it should be that should be a registration.
We'd love to see new faces, so please stop on by the panel. And when you're watching the show, and you may feel that you don't have anything to add, you listen to a thing and you say, "Hey, I might be able to answer that question." That's how you know it's time to join the panel. Let's go to the next question.
And it's from Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia. I got the Apple 4K 64 gigs for $88. What are the best use cases with my ATEM Mini Pro? Is it possible to run PowerPoint on Apple TV for House of Worship?
Go ahead, John.
It's possible to run PowerPoint. It's not good, because what you're going to end up doing is you're probably building the PowerPoint on a PC or a Mac somewhere, and then you'll move that file into an iPad is the only way I know to easily do that. I mean, you could AirPlay a Mac screen to a ATEM Mini, but then you're losing all the benefits of just plugging the computer right into the ATEM Mini. You could mirror a screen from an iPad to an ATEM, but then you might have some different issues with things like aspect ratio. And so I don't think it's really a great choice to do it that way. I would just hardwire it straight into the ATEM.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think you've sort of got two choices. You can either use AirPlay, so you've got your Apple TV is connected to whatever the projection system is that you're using in the House of Worship, and your Mac or your PC, effectively your Mac, you will AirPlay onto the Apple TV, and that's projected. And that's a pretty permanent way of doing it. The other solution is to have the Apple TV fed into your ATEM, which is maybe what you're asking for, and then just mix as you would normally as that being a source. And then you still AirPlay from your Mac to your Apple TV, but that's one of the HDMI inputs on your ATEM.
And Tom?
Right. And once you hook that Apple TV to your ATEM, then you'll have the flexibility of anything that you have that you want to AirPlay from your MacBook, your iPads, your iPhone, any of those devices. Then you can go wirelessly. That way you're not nailed down to a specific spot, and you could even walk around and do your presentation.
And Jeffrey.
And then, of course, the other way is NDI for Apple TV. If you have that, doesn't matter what the machine is. I like that over AirPlay, because AirPlay gets really wonky every now and then if you're not close to the device. So NDI, you can go over a full network if you're using different types of computers, especially if you're using PCs. Mixing in with Macs, then you can definitely do the NDI thing over that. And of course, the tools are free. And
I believe, Jeffrey, you're referring to the Sierra app to purchase to use with the Apple TV?
That is correct.
Yeah, I believe it's $99. Good deal. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was going to agree with Jeffrey there. I get NDI via the Sierra app, which you can see on the bottom right of my screen share here, and it works fine. I mean, any Apple telephone, iPhone, whatever you call them, that happens to be in the house is able to send it in there, and I find it to be a lot more consistent than an AirPlay type connection.
Sorry, Sienna app. Thanks for the visual aid, Mitchell. Tony?
Yes.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out a solution for, we do PowerPoint presentations for the House of Worship, and for me right now, what happens is when I'm running the PowerPoint, it takes over all of my screens. I can't see anything that's going on. So I was trying to find a way to use the Apple TV and put the PowerPoint on something else and then just project it into the House of Worship services through it's a Zoom service. And I just wanted to find another solution. And thank you guys for your responses.
No worries. Maybe Brandon has some advice for you.
I was just going to say test, and test it again, because HDCP is still a thing and it's almost unpredictable at times, especially with protected content.
That's good advice. Those are the best 3 rules of protection.
Absolutely.
Let's go to our next question.
Next question in from Todd Perry in Prescott, Arizona. What would be the minimum model Mac laptop you would base a Zoom kit on to be sent out for remote interviews? A Brio and MV7 still highly recommended?
All right, let's start with Kenneth Jones, then we'll take Jeffrey Powers.
Well, as always is the case, the latest thing is often the best. However, around here, we generally try to stay one major rev behind the latest thing, just to let other people work the bugs out. For example, today, this is a MacBook 2019 Intel thing, a little i3, I think, or i5, I guess it is. And it does adequately as long as you don't get too fancy with what it is you want to do. It does very nicely. The Brio and the MV7 are, in fact, the go-to kit these days. Primarily, I think it's a case of best bang for the buck. The MV7 is a very decent little microphone that has a USB output as well as an XLR. It does suffer a little bit from plosive distress if you address it correctly. I'm sorry, if you address it directly. So off to the side is always better for that one. And the Brio is a pretty decent camera. This is a Brio that you're looking at now. With enough light, it does fairly well, and it can be remotely controlled in terms of pan and tilt from a host on a Zoom session. So all in all, it's a pretty decent combination these days, but we're always looking for something better.
Nice kit. Jeffrey?
I think I'm going to be the underdog in this group because I'm going to tell you not to use a Mac. In this case, a Mac laptop's going to be twice the amount than a PC will. I could actually buy 2 to 3 PCs that'll do the exact same job that you would need to do that Mac laptop. So that way you'd have a backup if somebody decided, as they're pulling it out, they break the system or break the computer. I also would not use a laptop. I would use something more of the Mac Mini if you want to go with the Mac side. If they absolutely need to see the screen and the key and have a keyboard and mouse, then a portable monitor would be something in its that I would probably bring in there. But the most important thing is I don't want them to touch anything with my remote kits. I want to be able to plug it in, have them plug it in, and then I do all the rest. And that's somewhere like a team viewer will come into play, and I can connect up to it on my own terms and have them very little touch that computer, so they mess it up. But the biggest thing with the Mac also is the audio hijack. When the audio goes on a Mac, it's pretty much worthless, and trying to get everything back up and running is going to be a pain. Simply put, from remote location.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And Mitchell?
Yeah, I'm with Jeffrey on it. I think that's good advice. I'm very curious about what the statistics show for stuff that doesn't get returned. I mean, I haven't done enough of this remote stuff to worry about it, but it seems to me that the nicer the stuff you send out, the less likely stuff's not going to make it back to you. For example, between the Brio and the MV7, that MV7's a nice-looking mic. I'm going to be very curious to see how the upcoming tests that Alex is going to run on the $200, sub-$200 microphones. There's, I think, a Samsung that looks a lot like the MV7. Sounds pretty good, that I'd rather risk in a send-out kind of scenario.
And Roscoe?
I am brought to you today on a Shure MV7 and a Brio running through a 2015 MagSafe MacBook Pro So running Audio Hijack 4 just fine. If I'm not glitching and the camera looks decent, then I'd say this is pushing down someplace. You can go into the used market and pick these up pretty inexpensively, but the time it takes to configure it and put all the modern software onto it and all that is may not be worth buying unless you can get a whole lot of these that all came out of a company at the same time.
Thanks for the practical test, Roscoe. Alex?
By the way, Mitch, I got the little mic that I haven't tested it yet, but it's here. So anyway, it's really, the funny thing that I noticed about it was that I constantly say, why do people put the mic screw-in thing? Why do they put that mount on everything? Why don't they just use a 1/4-20? And then when I get one with a 1/4-20, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Anyway, but it's a good idea. The MV7 and Brio is what we send out. We are, in the past, we've sent out Mac Minis. We're going to move we're looking at either the MacBook Pros or the Airs. We've used PCs in the past. It's just a lot of times when you get a cheaper one, and they won't do 1080. So that's been we've had a lot of issues with that. Because it gets clamped down, and the M1s don't do that. So I think that we're looking at that. The main reason that we're looking at the MacBook Pros instead of the Airs is mostly the number of jacks, that are available to us. So by having, we need more USB-Cs, to be able to plug everything in. So having 4 mounts is useful. We actually we have a very high rate of return. The main thing is to send out the packaging in a way that makes it easy to pack it back up again, and to make sure to send a FedEx label with it, so that there's not really any thought process to it. And then with the larger kits, we send somebody to go pick it up. That helps a lot too.
Alex, do you ever send redundant sets to panels?
No, we don't send it. We test everything before it goes out, so everything gets pre-flighted on the way out. Recently for the Michael Krasny show, we were doing mostly just the MV7s is all because we treat that as primarily a radio show, and it's, we can kind of see them, but for the most part, it's just the mic that we care about, which has made a huge difference. But on the larger kits, we send out just what's necessary, and we hope that it survives. We haven't, knock on wood, it hasn't been a big issue for us to have those, because the kits don't get heavily used. A lot of the kits don't get heavily used. They're in pretty good condition.
Gotcha. And Mitchell?
I just wanted to point out that little mic me that Alex held up is kind of cool. I use it with a 1/4-20 mic stand adapter, so that gets it up off the desk. You can put it on a shelf. But what I like about it is that it doesn't look like a microphone, so less likely to be confused for one. The button on the top of it turns it on and off, and it automatically configures itself to the volume of the voice of the person talking to it. It has a little processing gizmo inside of it.
See, that scares
so it pardon me?
I don't want AGC. Is there a way to turn that AGC off?
Yeah, it's not really AGC. It's just sort of like it just sets the gain staging to the most likely spot. So cool. It's cool, but I haven't
got to play it with it yet. I'm afraid I got COVID before all the mics were coming in, so they're all sitting in a pile. This just happens to be one of them. But I got lots of boxes of mics.
I don't think you can get COVID from a mic me.
No, I didn't get it from the mic me. I just said I got it. The mics came in while I had it, so I haven't been able to play with it. I'm not claiming that mic me gave me COVID. Mic me. This is the mic me MIKME is the name of this little guy. So it's cute.
Very nice. Let's go to our next question.
Next question in from Peter Sargent in Round Rock, Texas. FCC Chair Jessica, and I'm sorry, Jessica, I think it's Rosenworcel, is circulating a notice of inquiry, NOI, that would begin the Commission's annual analysis of the state of U.S. broadband. It proposes that the broadband speed definition be increased, 120 growing to 1 gigabyte 500.
Alex?
My understanding of that, Peter, and you can correct me, is that I think that what they're talking about growing is from 25 down 3 up to 120. And so I think that's what they're proposing to jump to. The 25.3 is worthless. Like, I don't even know why they even have that as a number. So the 100-20, I think is more reasonable as a basic broadband definition, I think it should be 40. I think it should be probably 240, is probably where we should really be thinking about. Obviously, 1 gig to 500 is the right answer for what people should be getting. And I think that if they have any open inquiry, what we really should be pushing is just use this as a time to underline that internet should be made a utility, and that utility should be glass to the house, like fiber to the house. So while this conversation's happening, we just need to be, you'll see me kind of swing that a lot, but glass to the house is, we did it with electricity, we did it with phones, we did it with plumbing. We can do it with internet. And it would change the structure of the United States more than anything else we could possibly do, is to put fiber into everybody's house, because suddenly everybody can live where they want to live. They have the connect. I just talked to someone yesterday who's actually in our group that isn't going to move to where they want to move because there's not enough internet. So there, and that is, it would be dramatic, like what it would change if we just had fiber to every home.
Let's have John Snyder, then Peter.
Yeah, I also hope that there's an education campaign that tells people when there's two people using a connection, it's split in half, and that it's a zero-sum gain. Because a lot of people, at least in our company, think, well, I have fast internet, but if you and your two kids are distance learning and you're watching YouTube at the same time, you don't have the full bandwidth to your machine.
And Peter?
Yeah, I think, Alex, you were right. It's growing from the current 25.3 to 120. But what was interesting about this notice of inquiry, this is the first time, I went and read it. This is the first time I can remember where they actually was proposing a sliding growth scale over time, going to 1 gigabit 500, which, ignoring the zero-sum game problem for the moment would be an amazing thing if they could actually force that issue.
And Jeffrey.
And to go a little bit more on John's point, it's shared internet is one of those biggest problems with doing anything above 500. I know Spectrum just up there, 200 megabytes up to 300. So that's the minimal plan you can get nowadays. But you're still sharing it with everybody else in the neighborhood. And so 200 megabits could turn into 20 super fast if somebody's oversaturating the network easily. So hopefully in this NOI that they have something written in saying, hey, this is per households per square block or neighborhood or something like that.
Go ahead, Hux.
Yeah, to Jeffrey's point, Spectrum's actually the worst company for that. So they oversubscribe their POPs, in a way that is criminal. Like it's just criminal. And so they're, the only one that gets close to as bad as Spectrum is AT&T, and AT&T's been getting better as they added more fiber and so on and so forth. But Spectrum literally is just a sham.
Spectrum's getting better too. I've been monitoring it, and the numbers have gotten a lot better on
it's just
video.
So brutal.
Easily.
It's just so brutal.
It's not great, but it's
like if someone, if the Spectrum business is okay, but the residential, if someone tells us they're going to be on a show and they're on Spectrum, we just brace for impact. Like we just have no idea whether they're going to actually, like they'll test fine in the morning and by the afternoon we can't use them. It is a criminal offense to what they're doing to their customers.
And Ken.
I think this slowly rising scale is a nod to the providers. It has nothing to do with the physical layer. Alex wants fiber to the desktop, and that's a big pipe, and that's construction is a difficult thing to do, and it won't happen on the impetus of the provider. This has to be a federally funded national rollout, and somebody else has got to pay for that, which is you and me. But it needs to happen. I certainly agree.
And Alex, that's our last thought.
We just have to admit that telecommunications has failed us. They have failed us. And, I don't say that very often. I'm not a big, the government should take this over. It's not usually the way I look at this, but they have completely failed, and it's failing our country. If we look at what happened in COVID, a huge portion of the upset and people not being connected and not being able to go to school and not being able to go to work and not being able to, that's all of the telecommunications fault. It's their fault. If it had been a utility, if it had been fiber to the house, 5 years ago, which is when people like me started talking about it, it would have been nothing. like, everyone would have been connected and everything, and again, we've done it before, we can do it again, and it's just at this point, we gave them their chance and they have horribly failed us for money.
Well, the business of media and communications, this definitely is our backbone. Let's go on to our next question, Mitchell.
TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I know I'm late to the second hour suggestions, but the Daily Tech News Show podcast is doing a week with special guests all next week. Could we do something like that periodically where we have a week of special guests?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
First of all, I'd love to say I love that traversal. That's awesome how it gets there by the question. So to answer that question, what I really think we should do instead of doing daily second hour with different guests is to actually have a 2-day event and start thinking about promoting something where it's going to be about somewhere to 4 to 6 hours where we go from guest to guest to guest and just kind of really make it special and tie it down that way. And then, of course, you can join at your own time and you can watch afterwards. But make a couple good days where we have a lot of great guests that are talking about things. We can do it before like an NAB or anything like that, just to get everybody interested, or maybe even afterwards, trying to figure out the aftermath. We find out about this great product, but we want to know more from like a BlackMagic. So having a couple hours, more than just a single second hour, that people could really dig their teeth into and learn a little bit more about it. I think that would be the better thing rather than separating it out between 5 days.
Yeah, it might be an issue of quantity versus quality. So it depends on what our audience is interested in seeing. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think it's a great idea. It just sounds like a lot of work. And getting a guest every day, whether we're asking Alex to do that or a team to do it, booking people is the hardest part, I find, of doing all these things. And booking good people that you trust, that you rely on, that you don't have to, do an hour and a half's rehearsal with, I think that's very hard to do. And I think some of the bigger name shows have the ability to draw on the same people time and time again, so they feel like guests, but they're actually returning people. So the other thing I would tell you is my experiences of office hours is that we have some incredible people here. And the more diverse we make the group on this panel, the more subjects we get to cover. And while we don't necessarily want to drift into every piece of technology, we could do some of that with just the diverse panel that we have here.
That's a good point. Alex?
Yeah, it's mostly a function of effort, and so one of the things as we go through the rest of the summer that I'm going to be trying to do is find, a group of people that want to work on that a little bit. It's getting guests for the second hour. You'll see some weeks that are 3-4 people that are special guests that are coming in, and, we would probably lean more towards that 3-4 a week. I think that to get to some of the points made earlier is that I think that that we do have a lot of expertise here. So having conversations, the interesting thing is that we generally have a higher attendance in both the panel and in the viewership when we do panel discussions in the second hour, as opposed to special guests for the most part, on average. So some special guests bring in more people, and it's kind of unknown whether that's going to be the case or not. But it's an interesting, puzzle that I've been kind of noticing is when we all get to discuss something about some subject, oftentimes more people are there for that. And so it's an interesting puzzle in that sense. We definitely have brought in some great guests, and we plan to bring in more. The 4 to 6 hour process is difficult. Like it's just a big lift, and so we just have to have a team that is willing to work on that. I can tell you that I can't. So it has to be something that's kind of grown, by the group to make that happen. I do envision eventually more like longer sessions in after hours where someone takes on, like they saw something in a second hour, and a week or two later we do a special session that's 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours long about a specific subject. But it really will take a group of people that are willing to stand up and make that happen within the group. And I would highly support that, to do that. As far as streaming it again during the day, I probably wouldn't do it, but as an after hours thing, even an after hours thing that we record, in a breakout room, I'm totally behind.
Yeah, having a diverse panel is also a nice prospect. So, again, an invitation to, if you feel like to join the panel, come on, and you'll be able to contribute what you've been saying to YouTube for the most part. Let's go to our next question.
Thank you, Josh. Douglas Carmichael asked, many higher-end video switchers include 3D effects capabilities. How do you produce 3D effects without painstaking and extensive modeling time?
Go ahead, Alex.
A lot of the objects that we use in these things oftentimes are pre-built, so we can buy them off of a variety of areas. Now, the ones that you see in the switchers, a lot of those are driven by an external system. So there's some basic 3D effects, which are rotating 2D planes around and so on and so forth. When you get into 3D engines, like true 3D engines, you're talking like VizRT and other things like that, and those are pre-built, and you have to build them in a very specific way and export it. And it's quite a setup. So you only see that kind of graphic typically on pretty high-end shows, just because the amount of labor required to make that work is pretty intensive.
Gotcha. And Mitchell?
Yeah, Sunday Night Football. That's where the 3D graphics go. The rest of us get to do fades and cuts. That's where you should be.
Sunday Night Football, by the way, is still probably the best graphics for a show in existence right now.
Yeah, it's a nice media experience where we look at things, maybe we're not interested in watching the content, but we're interested in looking at the production and learning from the best. Let's have our next question, Mitchell.
Next one is from Douglas again. We talk about pre-testing ideas on those within your professional network. Can I run this by you? But how do you keep yourself from becoming buried in tests and never moving forward and executing?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Well, I think we could spend an hour just on this question alone, but let me give you 2 or 3 quick thoughts. First of all, you limit the amount of time you do it. Number 2, you limit the number of people you ask. Third, stop asking if I should do it. Start asking how I should do it. The if question is something you have to come to terms to. No one else is going to give you that qualitative data. But what they can do is give you feedback about how you're going to do it. In a business context, we'd actually probably break this into 2 parts. We do a qualitative study where we ask a number of informed people what they think to try and frame a quantitative study where we'd actually go to a big enough survey to actually get better data. But just on my own, when I'm working with my mentees or my mentors, I try and focus more on the how rather than the if.
Yeah, and oftentimes you don't get experience in doing something or having a system work without experience itself. So it's a tough thing to get test and get the experience you need in order to have a system work. So oftentimes if you're thinking about, doing something, eventually you just have to roll out what you have at the moment. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, you don't get credit if you don't complete. And so you might be taking on too many different things, in which case you have to say no to some of this stuff. And it's those people who execute who are successful. In any given situation, a decision made is almost always more valuable and better than waffling between 2 decisions. So make a decision, especially if it's something that you can go back on, and just go forward.
Go ahead, Alex.
And the best thing to do is get in production. Like be doing production. That's why we provide opportunities for people to get into production here, is that the best thing for you to do, you can do a lot of testing and that's great. But when you really test it is when you're actually in the trenches, doing it with other people, and you'll learn more faster working with other people than doing anything in a lab, and I tend to be very lab driven where I want to do 1,000 tests of things. But the bottom line is actually applying it to a real event that people are looking at, whether you're volunteering for someone else or doing stuff within office hours but you want to be producing something. And I would say almost always you should be producing it for somebody else. You step over a lot of your own problems by just not doing them because they're hard, rather than having some client that's all, well, that's what I want. That's why I want this crazy thing. And then that forces you to learn and grow. And if you can surround yourself with other people to learn and grow with you, it's the fastest way to learn.
Yeah. And the first things that you do, go ahead and do them. They're not going to be good. but go ahead and do them anyway. And then the next time, they won't be good either, but they'll be a different type of terrible, and you can learn from the experience. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I'm going to throw out a quote often attributed to Teddy Roosevelt, but it's not, there's no guarantees on it. In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing.
Nice. Jeffrey?
And I don't know if this will work for you, Douglas, but for me, for everything that I do is basically on video. So what I do is I record, and then I can possibly use that as B-roll if I'm talking about it on a show or anything like that. But it's also becomes my notes. And having those notes, having those videos, you can go back and say, how did we do this before? So you don't have to bother a group of people again. Or maybe even say, okay, this is what we did wrong the first time. And let's kind of turn this down a little bit and work from there.
And Alex?
Yeah, and just from the decision process, I think I might have told this before, but Ted Turner, is known for a long time. I don't know if he does now, but for a long time, a helicopter somewhere would show up, or wherever. Someone would always show up with a pile of paper, and it was 6 lines of something, and it was like not hundreds, but 50 things, or 25 things, whatever it was for the day that made decisions for the whole network of companies. And it just had a big yes, no. And he didn't give any explanation or anything else. He would just go, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And he would do it as fast as he could read. And then he would just hand it back to someone, and they'd go off. And that runs the company. And then he'd go back to whatever he was doing. Like, that was his day. That was his whole day of sending those things out. And someone asked, how do you make the decision so quickly? And he goes, well, I look at the thing and I make the decision. And he goes, what if you make the wrong decision? He goes, well, I'll make another one tomorrow. And it just completely, that's all there is to do is make a decision and then make another one.
Yeah, iteration trumps inspiration. Yeah. Next question.
Yes, I like reading questions, and we have enough for the first hour, and I encourage you to put a bunch of questions in for our second hour discussion. It's a great panel today, so take advantage of that and put your questions in. Next one from Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington. I understand that when a person who cannot receive 1080 joins a 1080 Zoom meeting, Zoom drops the signal to all the participants to accommodate. How can this be avoided?
Go ahead, Alex.
Don't let anybody join who can't do 1080. I think that we've always had this problem with lowest common denominator issues across almost every platform, and I don't know that for sure, but I do think that you're correct in that it's going to lower that to what people can handle. This is where the way we do office hours, for instance, it has some advantages to where we're not in the same. Actually, I don't know if people were in another meeting, if it would affect us as well. Like if they were in the meeting and not in the breakout, whether that affects us or not. I think it won't, but I'm not certain. But it's a really good question. But having the people presenting sequestered from that system, and then outputted to another location can kind of protect you from some of those things. But then you have to make sure that everybody that's joining is 1080p capable. But it's also why one of the reasons we have a lot of stringent requirements for people who join our events.
Yet there is a setting in a webinar where you can force 1080p to your participants in a webinar setting. As far as meeting settings, this is the high definition settings. And it used to be that an iPad would cause this because the iPad was the only device that got more than 360p but wasn't capable of 1080p. And so the way it was affected is that Zoom would not create, and according to our testing, Zoom would not create 2 high definition feeds for an event. So when a device like an iPad that couldn't receive the 1080p, they would get a 720p feed. And so that feed, that person's feed, if it had to go to the iPad, would drop it down to the 720p. And where you see this is if someone's in active speaker, then that feed goes to the iPad if the iPad's watching, or if the iPad pins that person, it's getting that 720p. It doesn't apply to all of the participants in the meeting. It's just the one that's being viewed by the non-conforming device. Now, of course, it's possible to have 720p on phones. It's not the default setting on phones, but if someone does enable 720p 720p on the phones, those are more people that can ruin your 1080p party by requesting a 720p feed. So if they're watching the same feed, that the active speaker, typically that's where you see it, the active speaker setting, you'll see someone, if you monitor people's meeting in Zoom that are not in the active speaker, then the offending device can't see it, and it'll keep that 1080p device active. That's fine if you're doing like Zoom ISO and you're able to collect those feeds, but that's the way that most meetings have happened according to our testing. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and to reiterate what Alex said a little bit earlier with the PC, Zoom was always a CPU over GPU intensive program because they didn't want some business CEO to connect up and have problems simply because they didn't have the right graphics card in there. So if you had a certain type of CPU with only 2 cores in, you were not going to get 1080p no matter what you do. So I don't know if that's changed since then, but I have a feeling there's still some in there. What I would do, and this really depends on if you're talking about creating something for video like we're doing right now, or just having a regular meeting. What I would actually do is, if anybody does come in at a lower bit rate, we send them to another Zoom room and then bring them in via something like computer with vMix that would actually marry the 2 Zooms together. But that was a very, we only did that only a couple times just to get a good 1080p video off of the show.
That's a good suggestion in splitting the offenders onto another meeting. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Since I'm on probably one of the older machines today, I'm actually verifying I'm only sending 720. So I thought, gee, when I got punched up here, I might suddenly get pulled forward. But I'm on a 2015 MacBook Pro, so I am limiting what I'm sending. I'm receiving 1080, but it looks like I'm only sending out 10. So that's just something to be aware of. There is a statistics panel in the settings in Time Zoom if you're not familiar with where you can go find that on your own machine.
Yeah, when you have a multi-diverse set of panelists, there are any number of issues that can cause your 1080p to be 720p, as far as your ability to receive them, their ability to output them, the permissions in the meeting. So it is a tricky thing sometimes, but we've offered some good suggestions about heading that off. Let's have our next question.
Next question in from Andre Dole in Berlin. My company's thinking about investing in a vMix system. The aim is to mainly use Zoom NDI, 2 to 4 camera inputs, and maybe some vMix calls. Any recommendations for specific hardware?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Lately, on the PC side, I've been suggesting the Asus ROG. That's the Republic of Gaming Systems. That's the one I have that I'm using right now with my vMix. It's they do a great job in being able to connect up, and of course, they have these boards have Wi-Fi 6. They have dual 2.4 gig internet, so I can patch it through into my router or separate routers if I want to. It's just amazing what you can do with that thing. Being able to, I don't do too many vMix calls, but I'd like to have those things on a separate computer because the main computer should be the only thing it should really be doing is switching the show. Sending it out somewhere else to record, sending it out somewhere else to stream is always a good idea. Then that way, if you have any problems, it doesn't take down the whole system. It just takes down just a small part, which you can recover from that fairly easily. So inside here, I have a Core i9 with 64 gigs of memory, and it's still got the 2070 card in, although now graphics cards have been dropping like flies, which is great. Prices, that is. So I'm probably going to get a 3090 very shortly. And then, of course, I've got a Blackmagic 4 HDMI 4K input card. So if anything NDI decides to fail, I can hardwire into it easily.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jeffrey. And I have, for capture card, I have an AverMedia Live Gamer Duo. It has 2 inputs. I believe they recently I wasn't able to find the model, but I believe they released one that has 4. So I can vouch for those capture cards. They'll allow 1080p input and 4K pass-through for those cards. Next question.
Tim Peters in California. What's the best way to implement a virtual background on a BlackMagic Constellation?
Go ahead, Alex.
Best way. So the main thing that you want to look at is on a Constellation is the first thing is paying attention to what your background looks like. So you're going to have, you want a green screen. I am a huge proponent for a company called Composite Components. They make a Lycra screen that you can stretch between different things. And basically you stretch it, spray some water on it, and it'll be wrinkle free. It's really hard to get the cloth backgrounds to ever be perfectly flat. They just always have a little bit of wrinkle, a little bit of pulling, a little bit of something going on there. So the Lycra will get you past that by stretching it and getting a little wet and letting it dry out. It'll just get nice and smooth. From there, you want to have a very even lighting. The way to do that is by opening up something like your RGB parade. Basically, what you're doing there is you want to see a very flat area there. So you don't want it to be bowed too much. You don't want that line to be too thick, and you want it to be a nice thin line that goes straight across that. And where it should sit is about 70% for the Luma. So the Luma should be about 70%. Basically, if you can, now what we do to do the very best is what we call green on green, which is we put green bulbs into a green keynote flows, or we actually put some gel over top of it to go green. That's going to push your screen to a very green. Now you have to make sure that you flag that off, and it has to be at least 5 feet behind the subject, or they'll get so much contamination and it'll make it actually harder to key. But at that point, you might get as much as 30 or 40 points in the RGB parade between the green and the red and the blue. At that point, you'll have something that will key extremely well. Then what you do is you actually you very delicately key the what you're doing with the Constellation. So if you have that nice smooth green, you want to push everything, and what you're really looking for is hair detail. Hair detail is what sets the key apart. It is like seeing little wifty things is what you're looking for there. One thing people feel like they need to do is make it perfectly transparent. You actually don't, because people won't notice it. If you actually make it gentle and you take out most of the background, but you leave just a little in there, you'll get more hair detail, and no one will notice it unless you actually cut yourself on and off in front of the background. And then you have the background back there, and that can be video or video or still. The other trick is that if you can match the lighting that you have with the focal length. So if you go way back and look at older office hours, you'll see where I used to key myself over top of that. That's before we use the My ATEM for my Constellation for the show. Before that, I had a Constellation here that I was doing this with, and essentially I took the camera that I have in front of me, and I left it on the same tripod, same angle, same focal, same focus. Took it to where I want to grab a background and grab that background as a still, then brought it back in and put it behind me. That way all my vanishing points and everything else all match up. And that is another key piece to making it feel more real.
Fantastic answer. And Mitchell?
Sometimes it's okay to have a little transparency on the foreground object in order to get better hair detail. You'd be surprised how far you can push that before you notice that the person is slightly transparent. And the other trick is to do two keys, one in the for the complicated areas like the head, and another key for the body part.
Can you do that in the ATEM?
I don't know. On a Constellation? That's two keys.
I don't think you can do that.
Never mind.
And next question.
Andre Dole from Berlin. I recently bought a cheap HDMI splitter to kill the HDCP from my Apple TV into my ATEM. Works like a charm. Any caveats using these cheap devices in production as well? And he's got a sample link there.
Go ahead, Brandon.
They may be illegal. That's a huge caveat that I would check your local listings on laws there. I've also found that devices like this that break the intended chain will be inconsistent. So again, I go back to test, and test it again.
Thank you. I'm noticing a theme there, Brandon. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Exactly the same thing. Power supplies on these things tend to be really cheap. So the first thing I do is, if you're really going to try and use it in any kind of production, is get a better power supply.
And Alex.
Yeah, what's interesting is a lot of these devices are in common use in installations because they get rid of the HDCP. So, if someone's installing something into a system, they put these little, and they're like, AView makes them, and AView makes them. You'll see them that they even have like the screw-ons on the side of them, so you can just screw them to a piece of board or whatever. So the AViews are really popular, but they get put into installations all the time because they don't want to have a client. They don't want to have somebody at the company call and say, why doesn't my thing work? So they just put these in all the time. So while it may be illegal, it's extremely common to be using them. The one thing is that their shelf life is very short. And so we used to have stacks of them that we would use. And specifically, it just, we weren't really using any nefarious thing. It just means that when we plug something in, it's going to pass a signal. But we definitely knew that they would fail relatively often. So you do have to know that you should have extras.
And one advantage for spending a couple extra bucks on your HDMI splitters is I bought ones a little more pricier. It had the EDID downscaler on it, so I can put one of my 4K out. I can do a 1080p and pull it into the ATEM. So some extra features on ones that cost a bit more. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Bray, California steps in with a question. Does anyone have an Ethernet RJ45 installer toolkit they recommend?
Go ahead, John.
Let's say I've been doing this for 30 years, little show and tell here. I like the Klein. Klein has a package you can get at Home Depot. You get the little tester. This thing pulls out, it plugs into one end of the cable, and it tells you if they're open or shunted. And then you get the crimper tool. And then the step up from that is this little Land Rover that has the same thing. This pulls out. And then to jump way up the scale, you have to get a certifier. This one's Agilent. This one's about $3,000. And then Fluke makes these too. But the $100 kit at Home Depot is fantastic to get started.
Nice. Thanks, John. And Alex?
And the only thing I'll add is that I don't know I'm curious what John thinks of it, but when I do Ethernet, which is very rare, I stick with the easies that just push through, and the easy ones that that was like pretty much that's only when I started considering doing Ethernet again, is when I could use the easy connectors. Makes a huge difference.
Those are nice. And I believe you can get them a little bit closer. You don't have to untwist them as much. So
yeah, it's just a lot faster. Yeah.
My physics brain says that's going to be better.
Yeah.
Good, Roscoe?
Do the easy connectors work on all of these crimping tools, or do you have to buy a special crimping tool for an easy connector?
You need
a special one.
Yeah, special crimping tool for that.
Yeah. Next question.
And Roscoe is back again. Speaking of bandwidth to the home, do I want the free router that MicroNet or MetroNet offers with their 1 gigabit fiber plan? Are there better third-party routers, or are they usually not needed?
Go ahead, Roscoe. Or go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know. You have to check with what they support. And whether it's, I think it's DOCSIS and how it, whether they usually have a list of ones that they'll support if you don't want theirs. Generally, the first thing I do is get rid of the one that is being sent to me because they want that for a variety of reasons. And I don't know about MicroNet enough or MetroNet enough. I know that with Comcast, they want to turn theirs into a Wi-Fi that is providing Wi-Fi to everyone around me as well as me, and they're just using me. And so I immediately got rid of that. I use an Era surfboard, which has worked fairly well. I do have to, and I had to do this with my Comcast one, is about every month or so, I just restart it. Because it needs to be rebooted to get new updates. And that was the case with I found that to be the case with the Comcast as well, is if you just every once in a while just turn it off, take the power out for 10 seconds, put it back in, you get better performance. It doesn't break. It's just that I suddenly notice I get better performance every time I restart it. I don't want to do it all the time, but I do it about once a month.
Good, Peter.
Well, the key here is this is fiber into the house, Roscoe, if I'm interpreting your question correctly. In which case you're going to have a little box anyhow that is converting the fiber to an Ethernet connection. And then I went from using AT&T's provided box when I finally got rid of my TV part of it to I use my own router, which is Meraki. That sits in front of that. But it can be, I mean, I went and looked up MetroNet. There's conflicting rule comments there about does the router they offer you offer wireless, or do they charge extra to turn wireless on in the router? I couldn't decide what the answer was when I looked at it. My answer to that would be, I'll just plug in my own router and be done with it.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I actually do know this provider. They're pretty prevalent in Central Indiana, and from what I've heard from other people who've used them, they like their service. The only downside to this particular service is they have been pushing towards carrier grade natting, which means you lose control of being able to poach holes in your firewall if you want to serve up a web page or whatever. I would get their router. I mean, worst thing is you return it, get a better one. We love ubiquity here, so I would consider that.
Don't forget to test.
That too.
And Roscoe?
Yeah, thank you. And Brandon, I'll be catching you down here to Southern Indiana. I'll buy dinner or whatever. So thank you for that information. Yeah, it's just a great, thank you for the input on this one, because I bought a house without knowing the internet connectivity. I apologize, and I know I'm going to be shamed for that.
No worries, Roscoe. Next question.
It's from Roberto Barrow in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. My church leadership has asked me to go all wireless on our 9 mics on platform. Your thoughts on going this route? I am not comfortable doing that, but thought I'd ask.
Good, Jeffrey, and then John.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not that comfortable when you go past 4 wireless mics, but the biggest thing is don't go cheap. Get yourself a system that's going to have the switchable frequencies, multiple switchable frequencies for all 9 microphones. Get something where you can actually put in a wireless antenna, especially if all the boxes are in the back of the place rather than towards the front, so you can get a more directional on the microphones, and then get something where you can easily change batteries, because I don't know if you're going to be using handhelds, if you're going to use lavs, but the biggest problem is when those batteries die and you got to go changing out the batteries. You want it to be quick switch done and put them back on so they can continue on.
Thanks, John.
You might also ask why they want to switch to wireless, because if it's just because you have an unkempt stage, maybe just cleaning up your wiring and cabling things up, making it look nice, will solve their problem.
And Alex.
Yeah, to what Jeffrey said, you want to spend the right money on it. And so going wireless with 9 mics, with 9 cheap mics is... felt like I had a moment there from Princess Bride. The pit of despair. Anyway, so you want to spend the right money. So ULXD or Shure ULXDs or Axient. The new Axients, I don't even know if the price is that much more than the ULXDs now, the digital Axients that came out. But you need something that's designed to work as a group of transmitters at a high level at 9. So, having 9 like cheap, and when I say cheap, less than $1,000 a channel is going to be a house of pain for you. I mean, it's just going to be, there's definitely going to be, you're going to have issues. You're going to have issues during shows. You're going to have, so you really want to think about, real mic systems that are designed to work with each other. When you start getting to these higher end ones, you're able to analyze. You also want to look at a way that's going to analyze you can see everything that's going on, because it becomes more important. It's one thing to be able to move a transmitter away from some kind of issue. It's another thing to move 9 of them away, because they have to be spread out between each other. And so you really have to be able to see all the frequencies. And so there's software that will allow you to do that, but you need systems that allow you to do that as well. I can say that I've never done 9 mics or more than probably 4 or 5 mics without either a ULXD or a Axient system. And so I would highly recommend considering those seriously. So if they really want to go to wireless, this gets back into what John said. Why do they want to go to wireless? If they really want to go wireless, I would definitely suggest that they go and pay the money that's required to have it really work, as opposed to, going a little bit wireless. I would just make sure in writing that you warn them about all the things that are going to happen, which is that there's going to be crosstalk, and there's going to be static, and there's going to be dropouts, and there's going to be all kinds of other things. So they either need to stay wired or buy the right thing for 9 mics. But 9 mics is challenging if it's not done well.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, what Alex wrapped up with about getting things in writing is entirely accurate. They are relying on you for your expertise, but they don't have an idea probably about the expense involved. So when you get the pushback, can't you just, the answer is, I can do anything you want me to do, but this is going to be the result. And make sure you have that documented. Typically, we give a client 3 options and hope that they pick the one in the middle. The one on top is way too expensive. Everybody runs away from it. The one at the low end is absolutely bottom that'll do the job, and the one in the middle is a good choice. That's a typical retail trick, but it works with people everywhere. Be careful of the can't you just.
Right. Roscoe.
My school went with Shure LXDs, and we went through the transition, and believe me, it changed their lives having that system. So, and I think we did 15 to 20 microphones on a musical theater production. So it is definitely worth the money. My caveat there is there are a lot of used systems. Do not buy a used system. They may be illegal on the illegal frequencies out there. So we got ours during the transition because we wrote a grant saying the frequencies we're currently using are now going to be illegal. So therefore they punted up the money for us to buy a brand new system.
And Alex?
And the most important part of the illegal part is not so much that someone's going to come and find you using them in Plymouth. It's that they're being used now for something else. so that eventually all of those frequencies will just get stepped on. So it's not so much someone's going to come and enforce it. It's just that they're going to cease to work. And so that's the thing you have to know, because they are bought up for something else.
Next question.
And it's from our friend Hasma Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa, asking again, I fired the meters remotely, have a Meraki in the office and
Meraki.
a VPN. Meraki, sorry. That's
but I like Meraki. It sounds very Lord of the Rings. It's the Meraki. Okay, sorry.
We did that song.
Meraki in the office, a VPN setup. As soon as I end the VPN, the remote machine defaults to login screen, resulting a gray screen for the meters brought in. What's up?
Dad, Brandon?
I don't have an answer to your question, Hosmic, but I have an alternative. It's called Tiny Pilot KVM. It's a Raspberry Pi KVM wherein you don't have to VPN into the machine itself. It just takes over as the keyboard and mouse. And then it turns it into a web page. The meters I bring into after hours every day are controlled by a Tiny Pilot KVM, and I can load up a web page anywhere in the world, click a few buttons, and bring the meters in. Without having to VPN or anything like that. And I don't have to trust the hole I'm punching my network. I don't have to worry about punching a hole into my Mac. I punch it into this Raspberry Pi that I can firewall off.
Nice solution. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think that's actually a security function if you're using a Mac. It is you had a VPN, you had that remote connection built into it, and you just took it away. So I'm going to make you log out and log back in again. So I don't think there's any way to avoid it on a Mac. If you're using the VPN inside of that, it's designed to do that, to kick you out if you've dropped the VPN connection.
Next question.
John Swan in Houston, Texas. I'm getting ready to redesign my home office layout. What is your recommendation on design software?
Good question. Go ahead, Alex.
SketchUp. You can get. That's all I've used for, I don't know, since it was released. So it used to be free from Google. Not that I'm bitter. But it's probably there's some other, there's a variety of CAD software that you can use. when we're basically laying things out, I'll use even things like Keynote and OmniGraffle to kind of just lay things out as far as an overhead. I just laid out an office for somebody, and I didn't have time to do a SketchUp model, so I just in OmniGraffle had layers of this is the electrical, this is the communications, this is the thing. Layered them all down on as an overhead, which was enough for the conversation. So you can definitely do it in something like OmniGraffle to make that happen in layers as far as just 2D layout. If you really want to see what it looks like, SketchUp is the way to go. And what's really kind of cool is that you can export that out as there's a couple different ways of doing this, but you can export it out as a 3D as a glib file that or USDZ, or convert it to USDZ as an OBJ and then convert it with object converter, and a reality converter, I think. And you can actually, if you have an iPhone, like walk around the new office. You can build a 3D version of it and then walk around and see what it looks like from that point of view.
Has it been recent since they started charging for SketchUp?
Maybe the last 5 years. So recent-ish.
Yeah.
Like, yes. Yeah. But yeah. So it's it's a quirky app to learn how to model in. It has some odd behaviors, but it once you get used to it, as far as basic layout, I find it to be the easiest one to build out.
Nice. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'd say go into the archives a little bit, because I think there's been some pretty good shows. I think the ones on 80/20 and stuff, and Alex was designing, at one point in time and showing some stuff. So there may be some good information back there on layouts. And then the other thing is wiring is important to me. I happen to use a thing called Flowchart to do my wiring setups, but I know people use H2R Graphics has a great setup, I believe, that'll also help you with your wiring, which I consider important to any layout.
Yeah, and if you're using MakerPipe, they give you these little models you can build. So there's that. Jeffrey?
So if you need to go the free route, you can go up on Tinkercad and actually put together your room. And if you need something more specific, like specific sizes of couches and tables and things like that, then you might want to go with something else. But if you want to get a basic idea, then Tinkercad, you just go online, you sign up for the account, and then put your room together.
Fantastic. And Alex?
Not a software thing, but I am, one of the reasons my thing got delayed is that I'm saving up enough money that I can not only build my office, but I can put in I went back and forth and decided I'm going to put a raised floor in, like just 3 inches. I just got to raise it up 3 inches and then put everything on top of it. I went back and forth about it, and I was just like, it's $3,000 for me to do that, or maybe $2,500 for me to do it in my little office. And I was just like, I'm going to wait until I have the money to do all of those things, because you can't do it later. Like you can't put it in later, and just having all these wires everywhere drives me crazy. And so being able to put them, I've worked on so many sets where we've done it, and I really wrestled with that, and then decided I'm not going to move forward until I can put the raised floor in, because it also protects the floor that exists. So
it's magical, magical access from below and above. Next question.
David Brady from New York City. Using Keynote, is there a way to bulk change select formats, actions, and builds? For example, I have a particular look on slides 2, 4, and 6 that I want to apply to slides 7, 9, and 15, quick and easy.
Fortunately, David, we have one of our Keynote experts. John, go ahead.
Yes, you can. If it's the whole slide, if it's the layout of the slide, as in the background and where placeholders are put, your default images, you want to go to the top left of your toolbar in the View dropdown and choose Edit Slide Layouts. And then you'll be able to edit the template for the individual slides. Secondarily, I don't know if that will capture animations and transitions. In order to do any of those things, if you want to change individual objects, select the object you want. You can copy paste the format of an object or copy paste the animation of an object. And the copy paste the format is Command Option C, Command Option V. So if you have like a rectangle and a circle, you can copy the color, the outline, the opacity of the rectangle, and paste it onto the circle. And it will stay a circle but change its appearance. So those are the two things I would look at first to go quickly through it.
Thanks, John. And Alex?
And if the slides look very similar, my fastest way of doing that is I copy the slide and then put the information back into it. So if they're very, very similar, I just I duplicate the slide and then put the information back in, and then everything works the way the way I expect it to. But otherwise, I would go down exactly what John said.
Thank you. Next question.
Mike Beardmore from Reading, UK. Is there a lower cost Lightning Hub for a leased MacBook Pro than the 500 English pound OWC one suggested previously?
You might have stumped us. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm not sure of the price, but I know Pluggable makes some really decent Thunderbolt 3. I don't know if they do Thunderbolt 4 yet. Docks, you can check them out.
And Alex?
Yeah, there's ones that cost less that just don't work as well. so I think that there's CalDigit and there's a couple other folks that I think do some. Oh, Lightning. Let's see, or is it Thunderbolt? I'm assuming you mean Thunderbolt, not Lightning. I think there's other ones that are lower cost. It's just that I don't think that they are as stable. So that's the problem we've had.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, how does a NetInsight Nimbra work? Is it basically SDI on and Ethernet out? I think you meant in. They don't share manuals publicly online.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, Nimbra is an interface for a fiber network, and so basically, it's not really even Ethernet out. It is a fiber connection that goes out, and it will, tie into a delivery system from it might have Ethernet in there, but it's set a series of cards. So the Nimbra isn't really SDI. It is a series of cards that sit inside of it, and those cards can be many different things. It can be SDI, it can be Ethernet, it can be MADI. Like one of the really cool things if you want to send a whole bunch of MADI audio channels from one place in the world to another, you can have two Nimbras on either end with these MADI cards, and then you can GPS clock them, and so that you can actually set up a MADI connection between those and send up over 400 channels of audio through a fiber connector. Now, it's not designed to work over the public internet. It is designed to work over private fiber. And so basically it is, we use, when we have Nimbras in place, we tend to have them using the switch. The switch is kind of the high-end managed network that networks use, and so on and so forth. And so, but we use when we're doing more, they have basic ports that we can get, but if we really are doing high-end work, we can set up these Nimbras, and we can see as little as 75 milliseconds per leg with SDI. So it's 75, and that's from San Francisco to California, to San Francisco to LA. And we think that we're going to be able to get that down to less than 30 milliseconds a leg. So the fiber network combined with the Nimbras is extremely powerful. And I don't know of another piece of hardware that works quite like they do, but they're very flexible. They come in different sizes. And I think the sizes mostly are related to how many cards you have available and what's going to be put on top of that fiber network.
Thank you, Alex. Next question.
Roz McNulty from Vancouver, Canada. I am working remotely with a family in Singapore, and I'm debating what I should take. If I can record some lessons, should I take my Bluey microphone, green screen? Any recommendations or regrets from past trips?
Well, if you're recording your tutorials from the computer, that should be fine. If you're planning on doing something hands-on, you might want something wireless. The Rode Wireless Go's are decent to keep the audio. Don't forget about your audio when you're moving around and away from your microphone. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I find the green screen on the road is painful. It's just hard to get good lighting and get it set up correctly. And we've definitely done it for clients, and we spend a lot of time. But as an individual, if I want to do something, I usually want to try to just find, I think your Blue microphone and a Brio is probably, a pretty solid way to go out there. And then you just got to really think about what's behind you.
Mitchell?
I like the slang for Bluey. I think I meant a Blue microphone, and Alex just confirmed it. I agree. Who wants to travel with a green screen? Even one that rolls up on a roller and packs away in a roll. It's still too much.
Yeah, I agree. The lighting cannot be forgotten about with the screen. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I'd just say lighting without the screen too. I mean, that's the one thing you tend to not have access to, that you can't just run down to the hardware store. Always grab is something that you can control in a lighting source. You can get a lot of light, and if you have a large space, you can move it away and use the fall off to reduce it. But otherwise, getting a light that you can control might be a good thing to bring.
All right. Next question.
Next question in from James Fosling in Minneapolis, Minnesota. A high-end workstation for photogrammetry has developed video issues. Probably Windows updates created that issue. What kind of updating strategy should one employ on special-purpose graphics workstations?
Go ahead, Alex.
I can be corrected, but I believe the enterprise version of Windows, or there's a higher end version of Windows that you can buy that will allow you to turn off the updates. Like, I think that's what most people do in production, is they find a place where they can turn off Windows ability to update. But I think it's the highest end version. I think all the ones below that will force. You can put it off, I think, in some of the other ones, but you can't turn it off unless you get the highest end version of that. And then you just have to be careful about your firewalls and so on and so forth.
Go ahead, Brandon.
You pretty much need to be in a production environment with a domain controller and all sorts of group policies to make sure that this doesn't happen. There's really no good way to stop it on a machine that's not locked up like that.
And Brandon, you used to be able to turn on a metered internet connection for that. Does that still work?
I don't know if that still works, but that was a workaround for a while. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You might try it. Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Now that I've won successful Matterport scans, how would I create a time lapse showing the evolution of a place over time? Can you archive and store these outside of Matterport's site?
Go ahead, John.
I don't know the answer to this, Paul, but Paul posted his first version of this up on Facebook, and it's fantastic. It's as good as any of the commercial ones I've seen on Zillow, et cetera, et cetera. So well done, Paul. I hope maybe Alex has some more information.
Fantastic.
Did he have multiple nodes? So it's like a little tour?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what you probably have to do is mark the floor exactly where you put those. I think you probably want to mark the floor and know where you're going to go back to every single time, and then you're going to have to get into a pattern, and it's be pretty time consuming to do that. But the first step would be to start just taking lots of iterations of that. I don't know how to actually do the time lapse, but that seems like an enormous amount of work. I think I would probably, if I was going to do something that, I guess the question is are your cameras going to get in the way? The time lapses that we've done in 360 in the past have been with thetas. There's external software that can control them, and so you just take a picture. They just take pictures one at a time at whatever time frame, and then we leave them there. But that's been, time lapse to 3D models to this. Well, I hope it's worth it. It sounds like it's a pretty big lift.
Nice. Looking forward to seeing the results. Let's have our next question.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia. Has anyone used Worship Tools Presenter? This was suggested to me by Gregory Wheeler, who's an office hours producer.
Go ahead, John.
I haven't used it, but looking at the general features, it looks like a nice small package for small churches. One thing I would watch out for, though, Tony, is it has only 4 translations of the Bible, and if it's important to your church to use a specific translation that's not there, that's something you might want to look out for.
Nice. Thanks, John. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. I currently have a semi-rigid soft cased for my Phantom 06 keyboard for air transport. Would there be a lightweight case that would still be durable enough for overhead checked baggage? The Phantom 6 itself is 13.25 pounds.
Go ahead, Alex.
When I used to sit, oftentimes I'd have a window that I could see the luggage going on and off of the plane. And when I saw our bags, our Pelican cases come on, I would videotape it and I'd send it back to the folks in the warehouse to make sure that they saw what was happening to our gear, so that they could picture that when they were packing it. like they weren't thinking about it like what would happen if we threw it onto a truck, but what if someone picked it up and dropped it 3 or 4 feet, so I would not go lightweight I wouldn't even do semi-rigid with something holding a keyboard. I would go full on Pelican.
Fantastic. And hopefully you pack it well so it works when everything arrives. So, and we are partway through our second hour of questions, and we have a great panel to answer your questions. So feel free, producers, to go ahead and put your questions in so that we can talk about them. Otherwise, we'll talk about the questions that we have. Next question.
Tony Mobley, Newton, Georgia. How do I turn off AirPlay on my iPad Pro? I'm watching on Office Hours YouTube on the iPad, but does not play because it is connected AirPlay. I have done everything I can think of. Still running.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Oops, sorry. So the simplest thing, this is my iPad Pro, and if I swipe down from the top, you see two little boxes. Under the left top, you'll find two overlapping boxes that will help you turn it on or off. If you're using it from the YouTube application, you may want to press on the button that's within the app, and you can often do it from there too.
Thanks, Nigel. And Tony.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. I have unplugged it. I have restarted it. I've gone into settings, and now YouTube is playing through the ATEM, and it's showing in one of my windows, but it wasn't doing that before. When I originally asked a question, it wasn't playing at all. And so now it's actually playing through the multi-view, and I can see it on the multi-view, but the iPad is blank. But originally, when I asked the question, as I said, it wasn't playing on the iPad, and it wasn't playing on the multi-view. It was just showing that it was on AirPlay. And I did the swipe down as Nigel had suggested, but it doesn't seem to allow me to do anything as far as AirPlay is concerned. So and I was going to ask this in after hours, but we don't have YouTube running during after hours, so it wouldn't have been effective. So that's why I asked.
Well, maybe Tom can help us out. Go ahead, Tom. Can't hear you, Tom.
Okay. You won't see anything on the iPad itself when it's AirPlaying to the actual Apple TV, depending on the apps that you're using.
No, the Apple TV is turned off. Apple TV is off.
Oh.
I thought that was originally the issue, that the Apple TV might have been on, but the Apple TV is off. And it's just right now I'm getting just a black screen, and it's showing that it's AirPlay. I guess it's AirPlaying to the ATEM. Is that possible? Because I can see it in the multi-view.
So, back to what Nigel was talking about. You need to swipe down from the right-hand side, the top right, look for those two little double boxes, find the Apple TV that you're talking about, and notice down at the bottom it says stop mirroring. Is that it?
Okay, I'm going to try to see if it will show you guys what I see. Are you seeing it? So I'm tapping the double boxes. Nothing is happening. And the options are Apple TV, bedroom, and Mac Mini. That's all that's there.
Take Tony's screen. I'm seeing mine.
Are you guys seeing it?
Mm-hmm. We can see it.
No, that looks like that's Tom's screen that you're seeing.
Yeah. So you're seeing the show.
Okay. I apologize for asking the question. I've never experienced this before, and
stop by after hours. We'll fix it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
So that's a plug for our workshop after the show, After Hours, where we get personal attention by professionals that can spend a lot of time on figuring out your solutions and offering other solutions. There is a paid tuition, though. It gets pricey sometimes, catching up with the gear. Let's go to our next question.
Nick Batt from the UK, recommendation for an easy on-off cardioid headset for use with a Rode Go mic.
Go ahead, Alex.
First of all, I would hesitate to use a cardioid headset in general, mostly because you'll find that it has a lot of sibilance, and you'll pick up a lot of things that are there. The cardioid that close to your mouth tends to be problematic, so we still tend to use Omni, even when we think that we would use cardioid. Usually, cutting the distance between the mic and the source, the audio source, is enough to get what you wanted out of the cardioid. And so sometimes you have to do it, but I would rarely do that. Secondly, I think that you can get, we didn't talk about price. I mean, we've used Paulson and Piles, which are in the $15 to $20 range. They work okay. They're not super loud on that Rode Go, so their sensitivity is a little bit problematic in my opinion. But you can also get I believe that you can get the correct connector. I tried to figure it out while we were waiting for this question, and I can't get the exact configuration. But I think a Countryman would probably have a connector for you that would work. But you would have to kind of fiddle through it. I did find one that was, a Countryman to a Sennheiser with a locking 3.5 millimeter. But I think you can get one that's just a 3.5 millimeter. You might have to call Countryman to figure out what that actually is. That's going to be more expensive, $450 or $500 or more. So that's an expensive one. I find that putting dual ears on is way easier than single ears. Single ears are really, I hate, because they're wonky. They want to fly open and you're trying to figure out how to bend it so that it doesn't go anywhere. And it's, I'd rather just put it over both ears and figure that out to make that work. So I find that dual ear is easier to get on and off unless you have braids. My wife has braids, and so she doesn't like dual ear because it doesn't work for her. But outside of that, I think that generally I would say a dual ear, Pile and Paulson on the one end, and then on the high end, if you really are just trying to get a great mic that goes in there, a Countryman or a DPA. I haven't tested a lot of stuff in between that I've been super excited about.
And Mitchell, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. Is it likely that's a TRRS type connector that you're dealing with?
I think it's only a TRS. I think it's just a TRS that does that. In fact, some of them might even be TS. I think that the Pile and these are tip sleeve for those listening. Tip sleeve, tip ring sleeve, tip ring sleeve. Just the function of that connector. But I believe that the Sennheisers are TRS.
And Roscoe.
Yeah, I just put a link in from Amazon. And so Rode makes a lavalier microphone to go with those headsets, but somebody has a little wired up, and basically it takes a lavalier microphone and turns it into like what a Paulson is for two over the ears. So might be a way to go. It's 20, you have to buy the microphone. There's another $25 for the wires to go around your head.
All right, let's go to the next question.
Hasmukh Kajar in Cape Town, South Africa. Multi-cameras is part of the cooking show setup. All HDMI into ATEM. A friend in office hours feels I will end up or need a video hub. Explain why I would need this even one day, if not now.
Go ahead, Alex.
At some point, you may want to redistribute those signals. And so, where you end up wanting to have a video hub is I want this camera to go to the switcher, but I also want it to go to a monitor that I might see, or I might want, or two monitors, or I might want to put it, so generally when you start doing it, and there are HDMI hubs as well as SDI hubs. So if you're all in HDMI, I have a 8x8 HDMI hub, a Blackbird, which has gotten a lot less expensive since I bought it. Not that I'm bitter. But it's, so what it allows you to do is have that. Now the problem you're going to have is that if you want to shade those cameras, it's not going to work. It's not going to go through that hub. That data is not passing through, or at least it doesn't for me. And so what you really end up using it for is not so much the cameras, and you'll just have to kind of live with that. But it is is being able to have any kind of computer inputs or graphics inputs. And if for some reason you want those in more than one place, the real downside of the switcher itself is that it is limited to the number of outputs. The ATEM, the base model being one output, and the extreme having two outputs, that becomes is very limiting in what's actually happening there. So that's the challenge there, and that's why you might want a router.
And Alex, is it the number of outputs? Is that why you would go with a hub as opposed to maybe something like a matrix?
I guess I would consider an HDMI matrix is the same as a video hub, in my opinion. It's limited. It's not as powerful or as addressable, but it's the HDMI version of a video hub. But the main thing is that I think that I wouldn't right now try to move everything to SDI from where you are right now. I mean, your cooking show should be fine that way. Again, you may just find that you want to double up some of the outputs into multiple places, and that's when you start to need a hub to basically distribute that and make choices. I want this one to go to these four, but maybe some other time it's different than just having a splitter, because it lets you actually change what's going out to different things, to different screens or different outputs.
Okay. And Tom?
So kind of a spinoff to this question is, would you put your camera directly into your ATEM and bypass the matrix and then use the matrix for everything else so that you can still do that control from your ATEM?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would do, is that the cameras would all be connected I don't connect my cameras to the matrix. I only connect other devices that need to be seen that I don't need to control. So they all go into the matrix there, and then the cameras go directly into the ATEM, unless it's a camera that is not if it's a camera that's not a BlackMagic camera, then I might put it through the matrix, because then I can't do anything with it anyway.
Nice. Let's go to the next question.
Tony Mobley asks, can we talk the technology of Star Trek Strange New Worlds as first season is done? What are your thoughts, panel?
Go ahead, John.
Mitchell and I, thanks for asking the question, first of all. Tony, Mitchell and I have been talking about the new series. I don't know so much about the technology, but what's really nice is seeing some of the early characters. Prequel was interesting to me, irrespective of the new technology that they used in the show. I really enjoyed it.
And Mitchell?
I never could figure out on the original series why they had what in essence was a 55-inch plasma display that they bought at Costco in 300 years from now. It just didn't make sense, a tiny little screen that they're look through. In the Strange New Worlds, that whole wall is the screen, and it looks like they're doing it in real time, too. I think they're using something like Real Engine there to create that background and saving a bunch in post-production.
Hopefully it ages better. Tom?
Well, while the set is so much shinier and new, I am appreciative of the fact that they seem to have eliminated the styrofoam rocks.
Yeah, but the new rocks weigh so much more. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I just want to say I think that the stories of how they are trying to stay true to the canon as well as the technology just makes for a great show.
And Alex?
I just want to see a scene where they roam around the planet's surface trying to build black powder by things that they found on the ground. I mean, and put it into this round. I love that. As a kid, I thought that was
so they can blow up the Gorns in the rubber suit.
The Gorn didn't realize that you could just find black powder essentially just laying around on the ground. Yeah.
It's because Gorns didn't have script writers. Next question.
Chad Lafarge from Columbia, Missouri. What apps and workflow do you recommend for getting started with iPhone to Unreal to create a location walkthrough?
And go ahead, Alex.
So a couple things there. One is the best thing to get models into, or the best thing to grab models, unfortunately, right now is the beta of that Unreal released of reality capture, and it is, or capture in reality. I can't remember which one it is. It's somewhere on my phone. And I jumped on it the moment I saw it, and so I was one of the first 10,000 or whatever that will. And eventually they'll open that up. It's a great app for grabbing objects. The other thing that you can use is Polycam is still probably, it's a subscription, which kind of bothers me because I keep on getting charged for it, and I just go, really? Did I use it that much this day? But it's not as good as the free reality capture in reality, but it is. You can kind of wave it around. I use it a fair bit, so I don't feel as bad anymore, because anytime I need to think about a room or a measurement, like I'm swapping all of my shelves in my closet with Alpha, which I'm a little obsessed with. I finally got the okay to do it from my boss, and so literally walk into my closet and just wave wave my phone around, and I got all the measurements for the room. And so I think that it's pretty useful as far as grabbing measurements pretty quickly. So the Polycam is pretty useful as far as grabbing that imagery. It really is a challenge. You're not going to get geometry that's really worth using from your phone, or even. The reality is, if you get LiDAR, it's so dense that you can't really use that in Unreal either. So the next thing you have to think about is what 3D software you're going to use to clean that data up. So you're going to end up rebuilding that software, rebuilding whatever you scanned. So the scan is giving you the raw data, but you're oftentimes going to end up rebuilding. Is that me or is that somebody else? Is someone else beeping? I can't tell in my headset if it's me beeping or somebody else. Anyway, so the you'll need some 3D software to do that. You can use something like Blender. That's a free version of something that you can build all that geometry with. I use Cinema 4D because I don't like learning lots of different 3D software, because there's so many clickety clicks that if you don't learn all the clickety clicks, then like if what happens is Blender's great, and to build raw geometry it's great, and you can do it and you can build lots of things. Eventually, if you decide you want to do higher end graphics like emotion graphics and everything else, you're going to want Cinema. And the problem is now all your keystrokes are all that you memorized and spent all that time on is all in Blender and not in Cinema. So I'd rather build everything in Cinema 4D so that I'm building muscles, and muscle memory rather than that. But that's a much more expensive solution. It's going to cost you, I don't know what it is, $70, $80 a month or something like that to have the full version of Cinema. There's a smaller version of that, and if you are an educator or in education, it's almost nothing to have Cinema. So anyway, those are things to kind of consider. But Blender is free, and it will generate all that geometry for you. At that point, the Blender I think has an almost direct connection. As Cinema's got a pretty good connection to Unreal, Blender's got a very tight connection with Unreal. So the ability to build geometry out in Blender and put it into Unreal is pretty robust. And then from there, I have not recently. Most of the walkthroughs that we've done were actually done in Unity, so I have a little less experience with Unreal as far as building the actual walkthrough. I usually have somebody else do that for me.
Thanks, Alec. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Maxon One is a yearly subscription, about $700. It includes Redshift and Cinema 4D, and I think a few other little things are sprinkled in there too.
Thank you. Next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. Any updates on upcoming event coverage, SIGGRAPH and IBC? How is prep going? What's needed? How can one sign up to help? What if they don't have experience?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot to put my hand up. I'm used to doing this.
Go ahead, Ax.
Yeah, I need to talk to the team about as someone who just is still recovering from COVID and looking at what's happening. I have some trepidations about SIGGRAPH, that we may be walking into a super spreader, and so I'm, which is so I think that I think we have to think hard about SIGGRAPH. But if people are willing to go, I'm open to it, but I'm a little concerned. So I just want to kind of put that out because right now I'm in a house of COVID. Everybody's got COVID here, so I'm just kind of like, oh, this is not fun. So so I think we need to think about CGRAPH given the spike happening, and then we have to look at where we think the spike is going, for IBC. But that's going to be up to our European group, and it's up to the folks that are working on this right now. If you are still interested in covering it, then there's a form the link is in the email that goes out every morning, and you can click on that and tell us whether you're interested in being on site and being remote. But note that we're going to probably think about it a little bit over the next couple of days. I got to get confirmation from. I need to talk to a couple people about that to make sure that we're all okay with CGRAPH. But CGRAPH will be fairly small, and then IBC we hope to do big coverage, but I have some. I do have some concerns about it based on my recent experience, because it's not a great experience. so anyway, we just want to think through that and how it seems like this version of COVID is pretty infectious, and so I think that almost any place where there's more than 50 people is probably a super spreader at this point. I mean, it's just ripping through everybody that I know. Like, it's not just, literally my son got it and then all of us had it in a matter of days. So anyway, just something to think about.
Yes, thanks for that, Alex. So we'll look forward to
we'll talk about it more on Sunday, and then we'll make a decision by the end of Monday.
Okay, fair enough. Next question.
Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts, considering buying another monitor. What is the minimum size to use or justify 4K?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I can justify everything I'll buy from now on will probably be 4K, and it's a question of how far you're going to sit from it. So until I know the distance you're going to be from it, I can't really give you a definitive how small can it be.
And Alex?
We start going to 4K at 23 inches. or 24 inches. The 24-inch Dells, I think there's a 4K version that we get. It does make a difference because in those cases we're pretty close to it, and so it's sitting right in front of us, and so we can actually we can definitely see the difference in what's going on there. As far as TVs go, 55 inches is where we start to think about it because we're looking at them at a different distance. But at 55 inches we start going to 4K, and I think we can definitely tell the difference, especially. You don't tell it when you're watching videos. People say, oh, the video looks the same. Sure. But when you see tight graphics and computer information on there, you can definitely see the difference between 4K and 1080.
Yeah, and I'll say that depends on your use case. So I have some quad views, and they go to regular television screens. So you can put 4 1080p screens on them. So the smallest TV that you can get economically really is 43 inches. And with the 3 1080p or the 4 1080p screens on there, it works out to about somewhere around 19, 20-inch screens each. So you definitely want that in 4K to split up the 1080p for those individual inputs. And the other part is about how far away the TV is going to be away from you. You do start to lose the benefit of the 4K the further away the screen is if it's not sufficiently large. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that I did put a link for a distance calculator in Bugana.
Thanks for that. And Mitchell.
Yeah, in most living rooms, if you're 10 to 15 feet away from the screen and it's a 55 to 65 inch, I think you might have a hard time seeing a difference between 4K and 2K unless you know what you're looking for. But the average viewer, I don't think it's going to be too big a problem.
Sounds good. All right, let's go to our next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. I'm considering purchasing an over-ear boom mic like a Pulson for my office setup. What's a cost-effective way to bring Mini XLR into a PC laptop?
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, there isn't any, but I would suggest that perhaps the reason you've chosen Mini XLR is because that's what Pulson has available at the moment, and I think that might be because there's no market for it. The Pulson that works easily on a PC, to my opinion, is simply the tip sleeve version of the plug. And you plug that into one of these little things. This is Audio-Technica ATR2X USB. Has a socket on one side for the microphone and the other side for your headphones. Comes with a volume control over here. Has a mute button that you can use here and indicator lights. and comes with a USB-C connection plus an A adapter. That's probably the simplest way to put a Pulson into a PC, and by our experience, it works quite well.
Go ahead, John.
You are 100% correct. That's why I was looking at the Mini XLRs, because that's what was on Amazon. So I'll look elsewhere.
Fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
Hasmuk Gajar from South Africa. Shading 6K as webcam. To date, the Keylight's Nanolite 68Bs were set at a temp of 5600K. Never happy with skin tone. This week, with help, set the Nanolites to 3200, and the skin tone was dramatically satisfying. Thought 5600 was the standard.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. There's something else going on there. There should be no reason why you can't get the 5600 to look the same as the 3200 with the right LUT or with the right shading. So I don't know what happened, but we would 3200 generally, if you have any windows, is going to be challenging.
And Roscoe?
These debates go on cinematography.net if you want to get into the weeds on it, but human blood is red, and therefore by using a more reddish light source, you actually see a more flesh-looking, in some people, this is opinions, in some people. So that may be, I don't know that that's going on here, because as Alex said, you should be able to just balance your camera for your light sources and get pretty much to most people the exact same thing. But there is an argument that says, well, we do have human blood in us. We do want to see that we look like we're alive. So therefore the 3200, which is a redder light source, may look better.
And Nigel.
And this might seem an obvious thing that I've missed, but not only make sure if you set your lights to 56, you're setting the white balance in the camera to 56. Because if the white balance setting and the light settings are different, it has interesting effects.
Thank you. And let's go to our next question.
Douglas Carmichael, when do you think we'll see an M2 Mac Mini?
All right, Tom?
Well, only Apple knows for sure, but if I was going to place a bet on this, I'd say October, November.
Interesting. And Ken?
You know, I am so tired of the M wars here. It seems like every time we turn around, we get a new version, and then we get a new better version, and then we get a new improved version, and then we get a new M number version. And what's a body to do? I think this is detrimental to the product line now. We have too many products that are competing with themselves, and I'm concerned about how that's going to affect Apple's bottom line eventually. We're going to run away screaming from the line because we can't make up our minds.
And Mitchell?
I don't think you're going to see an M2 Mini before the Mac Pro M2, whatever that's going to be, comes out. The other thing to keep in mind is they have a really nice product line between the M1 and the Mac Studio. So, you know, the Mac Pro is supposed to fill in the upper part of the gap. They can't go leapfrogging between those.
Nigel.
I think what we're talking about is the challenge of the supply chain and what they can get and what they can get in large enough quantities and what the market opportunities are. So the confusion that Ken talked about, I think is going to be around for another year or so, and then it'll smooth out as and when they can get the quantities of what they need. My guess is if I had to give a date, I would agree that probably towards the end of the year for the Mini.
And go ahead, John.
I hope it's soon, but I fear it's far. There are certain product lines that Apple just doesn't feel the need to update on a regular cadence, and from time to time, the Mini is one of those.
Alex?
Yeah, and just voicing the agreement with Ken that it is that Apple, I think, is not doing this well. like it is, like it feels like the 90s, like the mid 90s, when we had so many different versions of things that we didn't know which one to buy. I mean, I was like a hardcore Mac person and couldn't figure out what to buy for my parents and couldn't figure out what to, and I feel like I'm falling back into that where I just sit there and go, oh, I don't know what to buy anymore. Like it's a really, and I don't know whether the M2 is going to come out or whether another update or whatever. And it's really becoming, I think if Apple keeps on doing this weird cadence, that it's going to damage, because it creates stress, and it's what Apple's generally good at, is not creating stress of choice and so on and so forth, and letting us just, okay, this is the next thing we're going to do. And I think that this is not working very well.
Yeah, and Douglas, you might consider, as far as the possible confusion in your specific use case, is there something specific that you need the M2 chip for? The M1 still has quite a bit of life to it, and when the Mini comes out, who knows what other configuration it may be packaged with. I believe one of the upgrades resulted in a different memory chip for the M2 Air, or the M2 MacBook Pros as well. So is it something that you need specifically? There are some advantages with that chipset that might help whether your decision as to whether you want to wait. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, buying things according to need is an interesting concept. If you wait another 6 months, the industry saw goes, you'll get a really great deal on a new computer. But, it'll be 6 months later than it was when you started to wait. And sure enough, if you wait 6 months, the same phrase applies. If you wait another 6 months, you'll get a really great computer. And it always is that way. The way to buy computers, as we've had to beat into our heads because everybody wants the new and flashy thing, is to buy what does the job you expect you'll be doing for the next several years. And stop looking. Buy what works, what will expand into your future, and leave it at that. Stop chasing things that can't be caught.
That is true. However, it is fun to guess. We can all but guess. Can be particularly hard when companies are not being that predictable. Let's go to our next question.
Ben Bedward from New Glarus, Wisconsin. Updating video distribution system at venue with 15 TVs. Plan to use ATEM switcher. Each TV has dual Cat6 wire to send video through. How do I convert from ATEM output being SDI to a Cat6 back to HDMI at TV?
Go ahead, Alex.
We'd have to know what the protocols are that are being used here. I don't know, like how I guess it's if you're using something like a Geffen, then those are still going to be, those are point to points. It's not like you can put them to a distribution hub. So then those are just coming back out as whatever they came in as. But we'd have to know exactly what protocol is being used to go to the Cat6.
Yeah, and I believe those older transports had the dual networks with them. That might be a little older system. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I know we put in AJA IP converters. I'm trying to think what we did on the far end to pull that back, but that I just put in the link for the AJA, so you might take a look at those. So those will convert pretty much any SDI or HDMI, which you can convert with other boxes, into an IP signal.
And Alex?
And this is actually a place where, there's a lot of multicast solutions that will do this. We've seen stuff sent over to hundreds of monitors in an arena that are using multicast. It just has to be a network that's set up, for that. It's also a place where, in some installations, we've seen NDI used to basically distribute a single program out to a lot of different monitors. And so that's another thing to think about. But you just want to make sure that you manage the network that it's on.
All right, let's go to our next question.
Chad Lafarge, Columbia, Missouri. Alex, have you had to find creative ways to get work done while suffering COVID, or is it business as usual?
I have slept more in the last 4 days than I. So I think I think that it's what I did was I show up for the meetings. That there are meetings that I have to be in, and so I found that in a cocktail of, like today, like this morning, the cocktail of about a half a liter of electrolytes, along with a cup of coffee and some water and a shower, and I can operate for 2 or 3 hours. then I go back to sleep. I try to group my meetings into that window so I don't have to jam my system 2 or 3 times in the day, because I did that one day and it was really unhappy. So I try not to juice my system more than once a day, and then I get up and I do my meetings and then I go back to sleep. And so I did need to do that because things needed to get done. There were some things that just couldn't be avoided, and I couldn't just not be there. The delegation, I think we can see the importance of building up other hosts. Of being able to build. I was very fortunate to have a panel and have people managing an event, managing office hours, and having Bill able to step in and host over the last couple of days, having Josh do it today. And us being able to have a larger network. And I did the same thing in other parts of work, is just trying to hand things off to other people so that I didn't have to, and there was a little bit of it the first day where I couldn't see straight. I was just kind of like, just throw the ball away before I hit the ground, so it's one of those, like, you're running down the field and you're like, the ball just gets thrown back into the field. So there was a little bit of that when we got started. But for the most part, I think that the interesting thing about COVID is I can't, again, as soon as the caffeine wears off, I can't think. I literally can't put words. I can't put thoughts in front of other thoughts, and I lose. They're like little birds that I can't quite get a hold of, and and so they're just like it's a very odd experience. I was very fortunate that the symptoms haven't been particularly. I mean, the first day was rough, that it was, I had to drop out of Mac break because I was afraid that I would do something silly, like throw up or faint or something while I was there. And so I did take care to do that quietly, and, gave them a little communication like, hey, I'm going down, so like I didn't do anything. There was like a little back and forth between them, and I just quietly disappeared. So, I've done as much as I can. The good news is that I really thought about the one thing that's interesting is I thought about how much we give people the okay to have COVID. Like when you say I have COVID, everyone goes, oh, okay. Like you can, we didn't do that before. I remember working through the flu and working through other things, and I remember, like, I ran an event in India with between 103 and 104 degree temperature for 4 days. And I remember just sitting there, just kind of like clumped over like no one would ever let you do that now. That you would have a temperature and be on site would be considered not appropriate, and I was just burning up in the atmosphere and still trying to make sure that, Mark Zuckerberg looks good, because it just wasn't, I didn't see it as an option to do anything else. And so I think that, I think we have more room, for people to be sick, which I think is good, because I worked through a lot of things in the past. So I think that, so I think that's all I got to say about that. We can talk more about it on Sunday too. That's probably the most I'll say about it on this show.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was just going to say, get better, don't push it, and sleep as much as you can.
You see the tan that I have? It's from me sleeping on as soon as I'm on the hammock outside. I like being, I find that sun helps a lot. Like it just makes me feel a lot better. And so I have a Hatteras hammock out back. I call it my little sleep boat, and I use it occasionally, but now I'm using it like 4 or 5 hours a day, like just laying out there and just like, for some reason, open air and the sun has helped me dramatically. I mean, a lot, to not be not being in it, because otherwise I'm sleeping in because I was trying to keep the rest of the house from getting COVID, which was unsuccessful. So I'm the furthest along, which means I'm the one now taking care of everybody else, because everybody else has just started yesterday. So their journey is beginning, and mine is somewhere better. So anyway.
Well, it's nice to have you back, Alex, if even in a limited capacity. And if you'd like to hear more of the Josh. Alex COVID Chronicles, tune in tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow I'll talk about
our
more
introspection.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to thank Josh for stepping up and hosting today as well. Bill couldn't do it, and Josh was like, "Oh, I can do it." I was like, "You're it." so I was excited to have Josh work on this. So great job, Josh. It's just really well done.
It's the next best thing. It's the next Pennsylvanian in flannel.
There you go. Exactly.
Let's go to our next question.
Peter Belbin from Houston, Texas. Can someone describe how the Shox bone conduction headset audio sounds versus typical in-ear monitors? How is the delay due to Bluetooth 2?
Go ahead, Alex.
I don't notice any major delay. It's tinty. It's not. I mean, it's definitely not the same as having something in ear. So it's a little tinty as far as the sound goes. If you turn it up too loud, it tickles because it's just vibrating on your choke. So like if something gets really loud, you're like, whoa, I got to turn it down because it causes this weird sensation on both sides of your head, which is really interesting. I will say that I do love the Shox, especially the one that I have the open comms with I get a lot of great feedback that the audio, for people, it sounds a lot better. It turns out the boom, which we stopped using because of Apple, probably, does make a huge difference. Getting that mic closer to the mouth, it just makes a big difference. I do like the fact also when I'm on calls and if I'm working on something like I might be, the fact that I can hear everything around me as well as being able to have a conversation is a nice, that I'm not kind of isolated. I feel like I can, and what's interesting about it is that other people, because of the noise cancellation and everything else, other people aren't being bothered by whatever I'm doing as much as they were before. So it's a pretty good system. And then the reason I got it was because I can have in-ears where I'm listening to the show and I can potentially put comms on top of it, which I'll try tomorrow maybe. So anyway, for folks, but when I'm on shows, I can listen to the show directly and not try to figure out some way that I mix the show into the comms into the thing. I can just put a headset on and I have both of them at the same time.
Yeah, I have the Aftershocks version of the bone conducting ones, and you notice the difference. They do not sound like the KZs or the regular earphones. In fact, they sound different enough that you can differentiate if you have your comms on your bone conduction. Right. You know it's coming from that source because it has that sort of limited frequency range. The advantage to the bone conduction is that it has a unique input in it, and you can have other inputs available, or you don't have to close up your ears from it. Yeah. As far as the Bluetooth, typical Bluetooth latency. So that's not mine.
My biggest problem with them is that they look like wires, and so in my area, if I set them down, I have a hard time figuring out what happened to them, and so I keep on, because they're not something I can easily put in my pocket. I tend to set them down a lot, and then I tend to have to try to figure out what I did with them. And the problem is that I can't find them, and I'm on a call, and every time I get within range, they take over again, and so the person disappears. So I have to get better at figuring out a way to. During the day, I've kind of gotten to the habit of just leaving them on all the time, and I don't lose them.
These come with little stickers, so you could fashion them. Maybe they'll look less like wires.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, with the performance of the M2 MacBook Air, where does the 13-inch MacBook Pro fit into the mix?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
If you're using the Air for schoolwork and things like that, I think it's more than adequate. The other reason I would go to a MacBook Pro 13-inch is if you're trying to do video editing or graphics, but then you don't want to deal with a 13-inch screen, so I wouldn't use it for anything else.
And Roscoe?
Got to have my touch bar. If you don't have a touch bar, you don't have a Mac. Sarcasm.
Yeah, I was like, really? Is he really going there? So yeah. Okay, never mind. Good.
That's
sarcasm.
It's controversial. Controversy. Last question, Mitchell.
And here it is from Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you talked about the internet infrastructure demands of 720p versus 1080p. If you converted a 4K source to 720p with an FSHDR, would you see a difference?
Yeah, I mean, you'll definitely see a difference between 4K, because basically what you're doing is you're oversampling the 4K signal into 720p. So a 720p raw signal next to a 4K down to 720p, if everything else was 4K and then it was brought down, the 4K version to 720p will actually definitely look better than a native 720p because it's oversampled.
All right. And that was our last question. So thank you, everyone, for all of your help. We can't do this show without all of the volunteers that made this possible. Those working in the back, especially the panelists, our experts, giving us all of our expert answers and questions, and all of our volunteers that are working hard to improve the show. It keeps looking better and better. So now we'll see you all in after hours.
Great job, Josh. Well
Fantastic, Josh. Really proud of you.
Absolutely.
Well done.
Good job, Josh.
Thanks, everyone.
You'll see Josh here again next Saturday.
Day of the week. What
He
day of
doesn't
the
know.
week?
We walked him it's like he didn't know that he was committing to every Saturday from now on.
He
The joke's
created a
fine print.
monster.
It's a fine print, yeah.
Josh, come back. Come back, Josh. Don't run away.
Bye, y'all.